Hey, it's Becky from Patchwork Posse, and today we are going to sew a flower block using your charm pack as well as some little squares for our background and the center of the flower block. I'm also going to be sharing a hint on getting that block to be the right size even after you sew 3 different corners onto that center block. You are going to divide up your charm pack into kind of colors. And so I noticed that I've got quite a few colors. So I found 4 that were similar in color. So I've got my reds and my yellows and my blues all together, in addition to all the other colors that were in the charm pack. Now I do have a few that are a little more random and less color toned as the others, but I think they will be just fine. But just so you know, you might end up with some that are not as clear in the color story as others. So you just take your charm pack and you divide them up into sets of 4. So you need 4 for each flower block. You're also going to need your squares pre-cut for your background. In addition to that, you will need your squares pre-cut for the center of the blocks, which is kind of the center of your flower. The first thing we're going to do is mark on our squares. And so you need 4 because there's 4 centers per block. So I'm going to take these 4 and I am going to put this yellow center for a blue block. So my centers do have different colors. I've got yellows, flower print, and I do have a purple print. So just make sure that whatever you choose for the center of your flower, you've got good contrast between the flower itself and the center. Do need 2 of my background squares per charm piece. On the wrong side of the fabric, you are going to draw a line from corner to corner. Now this line is what you are going to be sewing on. So you're not going to see this drawn line. If you want to use a disappearing ink, that is just fine as well. You can use just a regular pencil. You can also use a chalk pencil. I've got one that's double-sided, so depending on what color your fabric is. Erasable air pens. And so any of these will work on your fabric. Just remember that this line that you're drawing is what you're going to be sewing on. And so it's not going to be seen in the quilt at all. If you use something that is disappearing, make sure you don't press these prior to sewing them, and make sure that you actually sew these as well in a time where it's going to still show up. So nothing's fun about marking all of your stuff and then going back and having it missing. You're going to repeat that process with the center piece for your flowers. Once you have these marked, you're going to take one piece and let's work on the center of our flower first. So we are going to lay this in the corner, and we want our drawn lines to go from right corner top to bottom left corner. So we want to sew on this line, which will then, when we push it back, it will take the fabric and put it right in that corner. So I can pin this in place. And I'm going to set up the other pieces as well and just take them all together over to the sewing machine. This piece is a little larger, so what I'm going to do is sew a second line, which will give me kind of a freebie half square triangle. That second line is going to be 1/2 inch from our first line. So if you want, you can also draw a second line on here. So both of these lines are where you would stitch and then cut right in between. So we're going to take this over to the machine and we're going to stitch on both of these lines on the first line and then again 1/2 inch from there. All right, now that we have those sewn, what we're going to do is cut right in between these two sewn lines. So we are just going to trim these apart. We're going to set this aside, that extra little 1/2 square triangle. Our next step after this is to take it to our ironing board and iron it. What we're going to do is press these to the corner. So we're just going to push these out and give it a press with our iron. If you have a wood clapper, these are so great. They hold down your piece and it really lets your whatever you're pressing stay flat and nice. Oh my gosh, so nice. So you just have to leave it on there for just a couple seconds or so. And now we are ready for the next step, which is adding our background pieces for our flower petals. You already have these pre-marked. And again, it's from corner to corner. So we want a background piece on both sides of this corner piece for our flower. So we can go ahead and pin these in place. Then we can just take all of our pieces over to the sewing machine. You're going to stitch from corner to corner on that drawn line. These are a little on the small side, so I'm not going to worry about that second seam. But if you would like to, you can go right ahead and stitch on that one as well. Once they're all pinned in place, we can just take them to the machine and sew them all together. All right, I've got all of my pieces sewn. Now, for the tip, I just wanted to mention that you can sew just on the right side of your drawn line. And that will make sure that your triangle that pushes back is going to be the correct side. Make sure that when you are stitching these down, you go just to the right of your drawn line and your piece will not come up short. The next step is just to simply trim these. Make sure that you've got your two background pieces on either side of the flower center. So now we need these ironed. Before we sew them together, you really need to check to make sure that they are the right size. So we are going to square them up if it's needed. I do have a large ruler, a large square ruler that I can use to do this. Make sure that you're not using the side with the 1/2 inch. If you have one of these, that you're using the ones that you can line up on the corner. These are going to really be they're going to finish the same size that you started with. So if this is a charm pack and these are 5-inch pieces, then this finished square should be 5 by 5 as well. So just go through and check each of these. Make sure they are close to it, on, right on. And if you need to give it a little bit of a trim, give it a little bit of a trim. You shouldn't have to do too much to these though. This does help when you are putting these blocks together. It does make a big difference. With those trimmed up, now we get to lay the block out. So we want to lay it out so our centers of the flower line up with each other. And then we also have our backgrounds are lined up. So when you sew these together, you're going to flip them right sides together, and you really want to watch that these seams are going to line up, and they should line up perfectly. If you need to pin them in place, go right ahead. The ends of the square should line up as well as those seams. So once they're pinned, take this to your machine and you are going to stitch along the one edge. You're going to repeat this also for the bottom two pieces of your quilt block, and we're going to make 2 rows, so the top row and the bottom row of our flower. So I've got my 2 pieces, got the top row and the bottom row done for this block. What I'm going to do now is just flip this over, right sides. Now I can line up this center seam so they lay opposite each other's and they nest really nicely. I'm going to pin that down first. Now I can go ahead and line up the seams for the center as well as the background. So again, pin those in place to secure them, and then take this over to the machine and stitch this block down. All right, so I can go ahead and give this a good press. So now I have one of these blocks done. You've got all the instructions, so you can finish putting together all the blocks you need for your quilt.